Chapter 1. Adrian Varcolacci. He watched her as she walked, safe in his place in the shadows. Adrian felt at home in the darkness, comfortable to be wrapped in its dim embrace. He had been in the position so many times before that he could not remember all the faces of the women he had consumed, but he would always remember how their milk tasted. Adrian Varcolacci was the one true vampire, and the legends about him had all been based on his desires. They had gotten some things correct, he mused to himself as he continued to watch his prey, but somehow the myths had misunderstood the most important detail. He had no need for blood because he craved something else, something much more pure and at the same time deeply sensual. The bites he made were not to drink blood, but to penetrate the skin and drain his real goal. The stories always had sexual undertones to them, and that was true as well, but he knew that only came from the location of the punctures from where he drew out his desire. As far as he knew, he was unique. In his long life, he had never met anyone or anything like himself. When he had first heard the rumors of the blood-drinking monsters to explain his victims, he had been confused. At least until he realized that the mortals were simply trying to justify what they could never understand. His prey had almost made it to her car, and Adrian stepped from his hiding place, gliding silently behind her. On his heels was Timber, the gray wolf whose footfalls were not quite as inaudible as Adrian's, as his padded feet softly touched the ground. Adrian's immortality was lost on Timber, just like it had been on every generation of wolf that Adrian had raised. To the wolf it seemed he was just as long-lived as a normal human, with a lifespan that far outreached the animal's own. Timber was the most recent in a very long line of wolf companions that stretched back to Adrian's childhood in the vanished age of post-Rome conquest. As far as Timber knew, the world and the people in it had always been like this, but Adrian remembered so much more. Human history had slowly sculpted itself into what it was now, and Adrian had been forced to adapt so it would continue to suit his needs. He knew that it would change again as the future rushed into the present, and he hoped he would be able to adjust. He had watched this woman since noticing her earlier in the evening. She had gone out to eat with her friends, but now was totally alone. He had overheard that her name was Valerie, or Val to her companions, but he doubted he would remember the name by the time the morning came. His innate sense could detect that she was lactating, and that was the only thing he was interested in. The woman had reached into her purse and had drawn out a set of keys that she held in her hand. She pushed down on a button on one of them, and the light inside her car came to life, accompanied by a click as her doors unlocked. She opened the driver's side door and swung it wide to get in. Now was the time to strike. In a rush that was almost too fast to see, Adrian closed the distance between himself and his target. His hands were hooked into claws that dug into the soft flesh of her shoulders as he grabbed her and forced her into the car. The woman had no time to react, but Adrian knew there was nothing she could do even if she did. His will would not be denied tonight. Pushing her back and forcing her down into the seat, Adrian held her there with an unbreakable grip. Behind them, Timber stood facing away and watching for any intrusion to his master's feeding. His keen ears and nose would detect any intruder while Adrian was distracted and vulnerable. Under normal circumstances, Adrian's enhanced hearing was just as acute as Timber's, but when he was taking his prey, his attention was focused to exclude everything else. He needed his companion guarding him and providing an extra layer of protection on these occasions, and Timber was eager to please